I'm Vikram Khanna, Associate Editor of the Straits Times, and it's my pleasure to moderate this roundtable on Budget 2022. Let's start at the beginning,
Sure.
which is the title of the budget, which is Charting Our New Way Forward. The question is, what is new about this way forward? And to what extent is this budget a departure from the past?
We have been fighting a generational crisis for the past 2 years. And we are still fighting the pandemic, but there is now a clearer sense of the post-pandemic future that we are confronting. And I think all of us are aware that it will be a future that's quite different from the past. It cannot just be a business as usual approach in confronting this new future. How will the next few years be different? Number one, our population is aging rapidly and we'll have to deal with that challenge. Number two, we'll have to make decisive moves to decarbonize and tackle climate change as part of a global movement. And then thirdly, the fact that we are increasingly seeing an unpredictable, volatile and dangerous world. When we say charting our new way forward, there are very significant steps we are taking that will be different. And this budget is really the first in a series of moves that we would like to make to strengthen our social compact and build a fairer, greener, and more inclusive Singapore.
Some parts of society able to do well. If you can look around who are the ones doing well, but some parts have fallen behind. And this is not just a Singapore problem. I think it's a worldwide issue, and it's all shown up in the budget measures as well, your income tax and even the GST as well. All these, I think it's important to have that progressivity, the strengthening of the social compact in terms of the fairness and inclusivity.
Now, before we get into the details of the budget, there's one issue I'd like to raise, which is all over the news, and that is the Russia's war on Ukraine and its impact. Do you think it's possible, as some economists are suggesting, that there could even be another recession globally?
I think we are trying to associate causation from the conflict to inflation in Singapore. I am less convinced there is causation of that. There may be correlation. I think inflation in Singapore is there because of many other factors, supply chain issues, labor issues, the pandemic, and now they may have gone up because of the war. Or it's also possible that merchants are now taking advantage of this, who are exporting goods to Singapore, saying like, oh, this is because of the war. So there could be price gouging as a result that could be happening.
There will be irresponsible companies doing price gouging, but I'm glad that in fact there are the majority of companies that are very highly responsible and in fact going out of their way to offer good value for money products and services.
I think the government has put in a lot of efforts as well to diversify our food supply.
Yes.
So as a result, our food costs actually are not as scary as some other places. Over the weekend, I was just talking to my uncle who's in Canada. I told him, wow, in Singapore, a tray of eggs of 30 pieces, a few years ago, it was 350, 360. I thought it was expensive already. You only buy it about 320 maybe. But now it's already 650. Then my uncle told me in Canada, the same tray is $15.
The pressures on the lower income are
Definitely.
really quite high.
Yes.
So on Thursdays, we have another discount program for the blue CHAS holders, the CHAS card holders.
Yes.
So that we try our very best to help people stretch the dollar if they shop at NTUC. If they don't, if they find better prices elsewhere, I'm actually quite happy as well. So long as we are able to hold a certain benchmark across all the goods.
It's hard to hoist all of this in sometimes because we put it out as the household package, the GST assurance package, GST vouchers. What does that all mean, right? But actually when you pull it together for the individual in terms of cash, in terms of utilities rebates, in terms of CDC vouchers, in terms of SNCC rebates. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of help, and we will do more to help people understand that this package of measures is going to come their way very soon.
Since we're talking about prices, let's move on to one of the hottest topics in the budget, which is the GST. Now, I think the question here, which a lot of people ask, is what alternatives were considered before you decided to raise the GST?
Our overall revenues will keep pace with GDP. in the coming decade. That's our expectation. On the spending side, we are currently spending about 18% of GDP, and we expect that this will increase to 20% of GDP or more by 2030. We say 2% of GDP sounds like a very small figure. 2% of GDP is $10 billion a year in today's GDP, 10 billion. The GST increase only yields us $3.5 billion a year. So to put things in perspective, I think this whole debate about maybe there are alternatives to GST misses the point, because it's not GST or something else. It's GST and other tax changes, because the gap is that large.
If you look at other alternatives, asset taxes, the scale is so much smaller. The scale is so much smaller compared to income taxes and also consumption tax. And then the other way, of course, is that it won't disincentivize work because you have the GST, right? It was just it's based on consumption, not based on work or accumulation of wealth.
If I may chime in,
Sure.
this is only the collection part of taxes. But actually, sometimes we should talk about the distribution part of what the government has collected. $4 go to the lowest income. To the middle class, $2. To the upper class, some. Most of it
30
actually
cents.
goes into
30 cents.
some. Most of it goes actually back into having succeeded in society. What are you willing to do to build that inclusive society that we desire?
In most OECD countries, the VAT rates are double digits.
Double digit. Japan is 10%.
So we really should be asking ourselves, why would Singapore be so special?
Building up reserves has an opportunity cost in that it reduces present consumption in favor of future consumption. I think people accept that, yes, we must not only cater for the present, we must also provide for future generations, which is a fair point. But how do we decide on the appropriate balance between spending today and saving for tomorrow?
So from a macroeconomic point of view, are we growing below potential? No. Where is our output gap today? No, we are at full potential, right? So from that macroeconomic point of view, no, we are not. Denying us opportunities today. Second point then is, are we accumulating reserves at a rate that is more than necessary? I would say the answer to that is no too. Why? Because yes, the reserves may be growing, but the size of our economy, the complexity of our needs and the challenges we face in the future are growing faster, much faster. On the other hand, I think a lot of the temptation will be the other way, that everyone thinks there is this big pot of money lying around somewhere. What's the harm? Let's just use a little bit. Let's just tweak some of the parameters a little bit. What harm can it possibly do? And that temptation is very strong. I can appreciate that. But you know the saying, right? How does a person go bankrupt? Two ways: gradually, then suddenly. And that's the thing. You don't think that it matters. Oh, a little bit here and there, it doesn't matter. But eventually, it will all add up. And that's why virtually in all cultures around the world have the same saying, that have variants of the same saying, which is that wealth does not last 3 generations. And we are determined in Singapore not to let that happen to us.
I think climate activists have welcomed the increase in the carbon tax that you have proposed in the budget. But is there a concern that companies may relocate operations, or some operations, to avoid this? Should we just accept that as collateral damage, or is there something that we can do to prevent it?
That concern is real, which is why, because in the near term, if you look around the region, not many countries have a carbon tax to begin with, and so the risk of carbon leakage can happen, which is why we will have to put in place, as I had announced in the budget, a transition framework and allow for some allowances in the near term.
And I think this is a great move. Singapore took leadership in showing that they're going to raise the carbon tax on the corporations. But I have an addition to that we can take leadership on, which is look, having carbon tax on the corporation is one thing, but the ultimate users or creators of carbon are the individuals. Now imagine if we could create a scorecard, a carbon scorecard for individuals. Now we can know who should be given a rebate, carbon rebate.
Final question, absolutely the last. It's a big picture question. Finance Minister, what kind of economy and society would you like to see in 10 years' time?
On the economic front, I would say we hope for a stronger, more resilient and greener economy, where Singapore will always be that special node in the global network, with the best teams assembled here, doing cutting-edge, exciting work and creating value for ourselves and for the world. And on the societal front, we want to be fairer, more equal, and more inclusive as a society, where everyone will be able to achieve their full potential, everyone will be able to give of their best, but with the assurance that they will not be left to fend for themselves when times are bad, and we will always be there for them, having their backs and moving forward together as one people.